Thank you for staying with us. You're still watching Today with John and Helen, even though it's Helen and Fumi today. Live on Plus TV Africa. So we had just recently concluded a conversation on helping drug addicts, but now we're moving on to another conversation that affects the family, and that is how do we prevent special needs children from abuse. And the goal of today's show is to educate and encourage everyone in the family on how we can do what's best for our children and the ones around us as guardians.
Yeah. And joining us on the show right now is someone who has over 10 years working experience with various organizations in the disability management sector. In 2017, she launched the Cerebral Palsy Kids Learn Foundation to promote inclusive mainstream education for children with cerebral palsy in Nigeria. She's a published author of many books, 4 specifically dedicated to helping families navigate the many nuances of daily living with cerebral palsy people or children. Tobiloba Ajayi is our guest, and she will be joining us with helping us with how we can present or prevent special needs children from abuse. It's so good to have you join us on the program this morning, Toby.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us. So, good morning again, Toby. So I just wanted to talk about, because one of the concerns for me, we know that children already are vulnerable when it comes to abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, but many people don't realize that a lot of special needs children are also abused too. In fact, recently on social media, I saw a video of, I think the lady has maybe autism or CP, and her sister put the video up of how someone had abused her. She became pregnant. She eventually pointed fingers to who it was, but the person denied. But because this lady had,
a
disability, she couldn't verbally articulate who it was. And then I was so upset. But thankfully, her family was accepting of her and accepting of her child, and they help her. What do we need to do to prevent this and protect our children, especially because not all special needs children can communicate and say what is happening. So what do parents, guardians, what do we, teachers, what do we need to do?
Okay, so let's backtrack. Everybody communicates, not everybody speaks.
True. Okay, I like that. Thank you.
We need to understand that most of communication is non-verbal. We're so, as a people, focused on verbal communication. But if you grew up in Nigeria, you grew up on non-verbal communication. We all grew up if your mother looks at you a certain way.
Yes.
You know that when you get home.
And she gives you side eye.
They give you a certain side eye. You know that, yes, you've entered it today. So we all grew up with non-verbal communication. So back to our question, how do we protect, especially children with special needs from abuse? Number one is to first of all establish a communication method. So if a child is verbal, that's easy. The child can talk back. You talk to the child can respond. But for a lot of children who are non-verbal, we need to then establish a communication method or pattern. So there has to be something that the child uses to communicate, whether it's gestures, whether it's something called PECS, which is Picture Exchange Communication System, where the child uses pictures to show you what they're trying to tell you. It might even be something as simple as some of our kids that we work with, they can't talk, but they can use their fingers, so they type on like phones and everything. And so when they're chatting with you, you'd be hard pressed to believe that you're talking to someone who's non-verbal, right? So that's it. Some children can type. If the child can't type, you can use picture exchange. If you don't use picture exchange, there are high-tech systems that you can use to ensure that this child is able to communicate with you. And that's the most important thing. The most important thing is that we first establish a method of communication. once a method of communication has been established, then we move it up to then use that method of communication to provide education. So it's important that we're educating, as we're educating our typical children about, sexual reproductive health rights, teaching them the parents' role and how to prevent themselves from being abused, what to do if somebody seems to be quote unquote grooming them. We then need to take all of that information, all of that teaching, all of that learning, and also give it to our nonverbal kids, right? Using what we've already established as the system of communication, be it picture exchange, be it, a communication device, be it words, whatever we've established as the communication system for this child. We're going to use whatever we established to teach them the exact same things we're teaching children that are not disabled. We're going to be teaching them the same things. We're going to be teaching them the same, precautions, what to do if this happens. Oh, no one should touch you here. I mean, and with children with special needs, it can be a little bit more complicated to teach. Why? A lot of children with special needs are dependent on others for activities of daily living. So you have a situation where a child needs help with even toileting. So how do you literally have to fully distinguish what is good touch from what is bad touch for a child like that, because somebody is definitely touching their privates almost every day to help them with just hygiene. So they have to know at what point does it become abuse. So each family kind of has to develop for themselves a system that helps them to communicate with their children and that helps them to teach them and be sure that they understand what abuse is, so that the kids can tell you in whatever way that they choose to communicate when they're being groomed or if they're abused. And it's important that as families of children with special needs, we have to put established safeguards. There has to be a lot more quote unquote watchfulness than you would have if your child didn't have special needs.
Okay.
That helps.
All right. I heard you use that word earlier on, grooming, and reading a little bit about some of the work that you have done. This is very prominent. The grooming phase, in this particular area of abusing the physical needs children. Can you expatiate more on it? This grooming phase.
Okay, so grooming actually happens with almost every abuser grooms. Whether the child has special needs or not, abusers will groom their victims first, especially when they're trying to abuse children. And it's usually it's a thing. Grooming is just basically the way that the abuser makes the victim feel comfortable around them. So it starts with them just being around, being the nice guy, being the one who's helpful, and that's what usually even disarms parents. Is where this person is the one who's is volunteering to help watch your child when you need to quickly run an errand. Especially if you're a parent of a child with special needs, you know how difficult it is to find childcare or find somebody who's even willing to watch your child so that you can maybe run an errand or quickly get to the bus stop and buy something. And then there's this particular uncle who is just being, or even auntie, who's just being very nice. I will say, don't worry, leave her with me or leave him with me. You can go and watch him. And so the child gets really comfortable around this person. I mean, because this person is the person they're constantly being left with while their parents go out. And even the parents, start to feel really comfortable around this person, like, oh, this person is really caring, this person really cares about my child. But then it then becomes, this person begins to use that opportunity and that access to first of all begin to try to begin with inappropriate touching. If the child does not know to report inappropriate touching as inappropriate touching and just thinks, oh, this person is just being this person is just being nice, it then begins to, it then escalates. And usually we find out that it ends in defilement or ends in rape. So it's just the process where we actually teach our children to also watch out for subtle signs of grooming. It's things like, oh, this game is just between me and you can't tell anybody else. Those are the beginnings, And so it's important that we're teaching all our children, not just even children with special needs, how to watch out for subtle signs of grooming. I mean, I had a situation where it was even just in the way that this particular teacher paid unnecessary attention to female students, and it was in the way that he constantly held their hands in a very uncomfortable manner. And I had a child report that to me to say, this is happening, and this is happening to not just me, but it's happening to 3 or 4 other people in my class, and we honestly don't feel comfortable. And one of the things that I taught this particular girl was that, listen, if you don't feel comfortable about the way that a person touches you, then you should let me know. It doesn't matter whether it seems harmless. If it's making you feel uncomfortable, that's your body telling you something is wrong with that. And and that was the situation where we were able to nip grooming in the bud before it actually grew into defilement and then into abuse.
Okay, fantastic. So we're going to have to round up now, and I like that you said earlier on about how we need to educate special needs children as well. How do we? Because I know that there are specialists, there are people that are involved with each special needs in their area. So how do we educate children? For people that are not specialists, how do you begin to educate children, special needs children? What are the things we need to tell them, show them, to protect them? How do we educate them in our own way?
So, like I said, as a family, you have to have developed a system of communication with your child with special needs, whether it's verbal, whether it's pictures, whether it's high tech, whatever it is. Then decide, what do you want to teach and how do you want to teach it.
Okay.
And then because again, you know that we have to teach these things in age appropriate ways, right? How you teach, what you teach to, and how you teach a 3-year-old is different from how you teach a 12-year-old, right? So you then decide, what do I want to teach? What's age appropriate for this child? And then you bring it down to whatever communication method that they are used to. So while if you were dealing with a typical child, you might use a book that has a lot of words and maybe a few pictures. If you're dealing with a special needs child that is maybe non-verbal, you might have to use pictures the whole way and very few words. So you might have to actually have pictures that depict each scenario that you want to paint and what you expect their response to be in each scenario, and you put it you put it all in a binder, like maybe have all the pictures in a binder, so that if for any reason they need to explain, if something happens and they need to explain it to you, they can flip to the exact picture that shows what had happened and then say, oh, this happened and this was my response. And then they're able to say, oh, and then maybe they're able to show you the picture of the person it happened with. So you just have to it's always about first establishing a communication pattern and then using that communication pattern as a tool to teach the child. And so it will be a case-by-case basis based on what is the communication pattern that you've established for that particular child.
All right, so as we get ready to leave you, I'm wondering the laws for punishment, for sexual abuse of other kids. Is it the same as for the special needs children?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. All children are children.
Okay, fantastic.
What is the law? What does the law say?
So again, the offences are. It depends on the state. You know that each state kind of has its own BAP Act, which is Violence Against People Act. So you kind of have to look in the state. So for instance, I think the Lagos state, there is defilement and then there is rape, right? Okay. So for rape, I think I would have to confirm. I think it's a felony and it's 14 years imprisonment. And then defilement kind of has grades and levels, and then there different punishments based on how that defilement is defined. The defilement of a minor and all of those things. So it's important that we look at each state now. For instance, how the northern states would define defilement and how they would punish it is different from how we would in the southern states or places like Lagos.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tobiloba, and well done. Good job you're doing with the special needs children. Keep being their voice, keep being their activist, and your work will get good reward. by making sure
Thank
that
you.
every special needs, one home, one family at a time, one school at a time. Because I even find that sometimes with special needs children, they get more assistance and help in schools, especially public schools, because a lot of people don't realize that many special needs children actually go to public schools, not just the private schools who have the. So well done, Tobiloba. Thank you so much for your
Thank
time
you.
this morning.
Thank you. Our heart goes out to the families with special needs children at this point, and we believe that our guest has been able to answer many of your questions. Once again, we're grateful for your time, Madam.
Okay, so inclusiveness, I believe, is the answer. So at times like this, we know we have to ease the tension, make sure that everybody's calm. Sometimes even that anger, all you need to do is work it out, use some exercise to just bring everything out. So we're going to take a break now with the fitness instructor, and then we come back to Farrah's segment where she'll be taking life lessons and talking about how we're going to navigate our way with this current fuel price hike. Stay with us.